life, we often face difficulties, suffering, and challenges. Every time we encounter these upheavals, our minds tend to become disturbed and anxious. However, the Buddha taught that in order to live peacefully and happily, we need to learn how to maintain a calm mind. It is not about not feeling pain, but about learning how to face and let go of it so that our minds are not trapped. This secret not only helps us overcome suffering, but also brings peace in every moment of life. Sometimes in life, we always wish for stability, security, and no changes. But have you ever wondered why everything, people, and things must change? Why do we have to face loss, sorrow, and sometimes helplessness in moments when we cannot control everything? The Buddha teaches us that all these fluctuations, pain or joy, are part of impermanence. Impermanence means that everything in the universe changes. Everything has a time to come and go. It is like a leaf falling from a branch, not because it did something wrong, but because its time has ended. You can see that the leaf once lived fully with spring, basked in the sun, welcomed the wind, and now it must leave the branch to make way for a new season. That is impermanence, which the Buddha teaches us to understand and accept. Imagine you are walking in the park on a gentle morning. A soft breeze blows, causing the leaves on the trees to rustle, and one leaf slowly falls to the ground. If you stop to look, you will notice something miraculous. The leaf did not fall due to any bad reason, but because it was its time to go. There is no resentment, no sadness in the leaf's movement. It is simply part of the natural flow of the universe, a part of the law of life. Just like that leaf, our lives are also like that. Difficulties, suffering, or times when we cannot control everything are sometimes just leaves that must fall in life. It's not because we did something wrong, but simply because it is time for them to pass. You may feel sad, you may be heartbroken, but if you understand impermanence, you will not be swept away by sadness forever. You will understand that, just like the fallen leaf, everything will pass and something new will come. The Buddha teaches that in order to overcome all suffering, we need to have an open mind, not be swept away by temporary emotions. Every time a storm in life comes, instead of resisting, we should breathe deeply and accept the change, accept impermanence. The mind is not to fight with life, but to understand and accept all changes. When you learn to open up, learn to let go, you will find everything becomes lighter. A small story I want to share is about a mother. She went through a life full of difficulties. A single mother with 3 children. She worked hard, taking care of her children, while facing many challenges in life. But strangely, she always smiled, even though life was never easy for her. One day I asked her, "Do you ever feel tired, hopeless, and want to give up?" She simply smiled, her eyes gentle, and replied, "Difficulties are inevitable in this life. But if I can't change them, I can only change the way I look at them. Whenever I feel tired, I sit down, breathe deeply, and remember that everything will pass, just like the falling leaf." Her answer made me realize that life is like a river that flows continuously. If we keep clinging to rocks or clumps of mud at the bottom of the river, we will never be able to merge with the flow. But if we learn to let go, to let the river take us, we will find peace. The Buddha taught that peace of mind is not a mind without storms, but a mind that knows how to stay calm amid those storms. A storm can come at any time, but if your mind is open and you understand that everything has its time, you will not be swept into the storm. You will learn how to breathe, how to view life with a gentle mind, not afraid or anxious. A friend of mine, when facing a life full of fluctuations, chose a very different way of living. Instead of worrying about what will happen in the future, he focused on each present moment. He did not react to what was around him, but quietly observed and lived in every second. Every morning, he woke up, sat in meditation for a few minutes, and felt the life in every breath of his. The Buddha taught that peace of mind is not a mind without storms, but a mind that knows how to stay calm and stable in times of storms. A A story that I really like is the story of a fisherman. The fisherman lived in a coastal village. Every day, he went to the sea to fish, facing large waves and strong winds. But the special thing is that no matter how stormy the sea was, he always remained calm and never panicked. He said, "The sea has waves, but I know how to go with the waves. The waves cannot hit me if I know how to keep my boat steady." His words made me realize that in life, we cannot avoid difficulties, challenges, or fluctuations. But just like the fisherman, we can learn how to go with the waves. When we know how to live in the present, when we can let go of unnecessary worries, we will find peace in our hearts. Mindfulness is the key to finding peace in life. When we live in each moment, not being swept into thoughts of the past or the future, we will feel the peace that the Buddha taught. This peace is not something distant, but a state that can be found in the simple moments of life. When you learn to listen to yourself, when you know how to let go and live fully in the present, you will realize that peace is not something too difficult to achieve. Peace is being present in every moment, understanding that everything will pass, and that the only thing we can control is ourselves. So, try to spend a little time each day practicing mindfulness, living fully in each moment. And when you do this, you will realize that the peace you have been seeking has always been within you, as long as you know how to listen and appreciate it. In life, we all carry stories, memories, and moments filled with joy and sorrow. These things can bring happiness, but sometimes they also become wounds in the soul, scars that haven't healed. And one of the hardest things each of us has to learn is to forgive. Forgiveness is not only an act of compassion towards others, but also a precious gift that we give ourselves. The Buddha taught that forgiveness is the path to peace. Forgiveness is not for others to deserve, but for us to be freed from the pain of the past. Only when we forgive can we let go of the burdens in our hearts to live more lightly and freely. Once, I had a conversation with an old friend, someone I knew had gone through many challenges in life, especially in relationships. She had been deeply hurt by someone she loved with all her heart, and although time had passed, she still could not forgive. She said that, no matter how hard she tried to forget, she could not let go of the pain. And sometimes, that very hurt made her feel she could not love anyone again. When I asked her about forgiveness, she said, "Forgiveness is like telling the other person, everything is fine now, but I cannot do that because the pain is too great." She did not understand that forgiveness is not to bring peace to others, but to free ourselves from the burden of the past. Forgiveness is not about forgetting what happened, but about understanding that those painful things no longer have power over our lives. The Buddha taught that forgiveness is to free oneself from resentment and attachment. When we hold on to resentment, we do not make the other person suffer more, but we are the ones who suffer in the long run. Resentment is like holding a hot coal. It cannot harm the other person, but it will burn our own hand. There is an old story about a woman who lost her child in a traffic accident. She was deeply in pain and blamed life, unable to accept the great loss. She could not forgive the driver who caused her child's death. Every time she saw him, she felt hatred and could not forgive. But then one day, she went to meet a teacher, someone she knew could help her overcome this pain. The teacher listened to her story of losing her child and the anger in her heart. After listening, the teacher simply smiled and said, "When you cannot forgive others, you are holding a hot coal. This coal cannot harm others, but it only harms you. Forgiveness is not for others to feel at ease, but for you to be freed from this resentment." She listened to the teacher's words and began to think. Gradually, she realized that holding on to resentment only made her heart heavier, preventing her soul from finding peace. She decided to forgive, not because the other person deserved it, but because she herself deserved a peaceful life. She didn't forget her child, but she chose to live more gently, not letting the pain take over her heart. After forgiving, she felt relieved, free, and able to love life again, even though she still missed her child. This is the power of forgiveness, not to forget, but to free oneself from the burden in the heart. Once again, I think about the story of that woman and realize that in life we cannot always change what has happened. There are things we cannot get back, people who cannot return. But forgiveness helps us not to be bound by the past, allowing us to live in the present in peace. Forgiveness is a journey we need to take to free our soul. The Buddha taught that within each of us, there is Buddha nature, a deep understanding and unconditional love. When we learn to forgive, we are nurturing the Buddha nature within ourselves. Forgiveness helps us become better people, not because others deserve it, but because we deserve a life free from the burdens of past wounds. Once, I met a friend who had been deceived in love. She had endured much suffering, but instead of holding on to hatred, she chose to forgive and let go. She said to me, "Forgiving doesn't mean I accept that action, but it means I won't live in hatred. I deserve to live peacefully and happily, not for the other person, but for myself." Her words made me realize an important thing. Forgiveness is a gift to oneself. When we forgive, we do not do it for others, but for ourselves. Forgiveness is a way for us to return to ourselves, to live a gentler and more peaceful life. When you hold on to resentment, you are only harming yourself. But when you forgive, you give yourself the chance to walk more lightly in life. Remember that in life, we cannot change what has already happened, but we can change the way we face the hurt, the way we view the past. Forgiveness is not to let others off the hook, but to free ourselves from suffering. The Buddha taught, forgiveness is not to erase mistakes, but to keep the soul free. This is a message about the long journey of soul liberation. Forgiveness is not an easy task, but it is the only path that can help us find peace in life. When you forgive, you will feel freedom, lightness, and love in your heart. And you will see that life becomes much more beautiful when you know how to forgive, not for others, but for yourself. In the hustle and bustle of life, we sometimes forget the small but extremely precious things that life has given us. We may spend the whole day running after goals, worrying about the future, or drowning in past difficulties, without realizing that every present moment contains a small miracle. The Buddha taught that gratitude is the path to peace. Gratitude is not only about appreciating great things, but also about recognizing and cherishing the simple things in life. From a breath to a meal, from close relationships to the natural things around us, everything deserves to be appreciated. When we learn to value those small things, our hearts become lighter and life becomes more peaceful. Once, I met an elderly friend who lived in a small village. He had lived nearly 100 years, and every day, despite his old age, he still kept a very kind smile and was always cheerful. I asked him about the secret to living long and happy, and he just smiled and said, "Every morning, I wake up, take a deep breath, and thank heaven and earth for giving me another day. When I eat, I am grateful for the food. When I drink water, I am grateful for the water. Life is truly a gift, my child." His words made me reflect deeply. How many times do we wake up without realizing the preciousness of a breath, of a new morning? We rush into work, forgetting that life is here in each passing second. To live peacefully, we need to learn to appreciate and be grateful for everything around us. A breath in, a breath out. That is life unfolding. And if we do not stop to feel it, we will miss the most wonderful things life has to offer. There is a short story about a boy named Min. Min was a 5th grader, living in a not-so-rich family. One day, after coming back from school, Min felt very tired and didn't want to eat. He looked at the plate with just vegetables and some braised fish, then shook his head, thinking to himself, "Why do we have such a meal today? If there were meat, something tastier, it would definitely be better." But Min's mother, after placing the bowl of rice on the table, looked at her son and said, "Do you know, even though this meal is simple, every grain of rice on the table is the result of many people working hard to bring it here. The rice is not just ours, but belongs to all the people who have taken care of it, harvested it, and brought it to us. Let us thank these grains of rice and eat them with gratitude." Min looked at his mother, surprised. He had never thought about that. He began to eat more slowly, savoring each bite, each grain of rice his mother had taught him to cherish. Min realized that simple things like a meal, a bowl of soup, or an ordinary dish were actually precious things he could be grateful for in life. Gratitude does not only come from delicious food or material things, but from realizing the value of the ordinary things around us. It is in this gratitude that we find peace and calmness in our hearts. Sometimes we forget that every day we live is an opportunity to love and appreciate those around us. A friend, a colleague, or simply a stranger on the street. When we realize that everyone in our life has a role and value, we will feel our hearts open and filled with love. I remember a story about a woman named Lan. She was a single mother, working and taking care of her young child. Although life was not easy, Lan was always cheerful and willing to help those around her. One day, a friend asked Lan how she could always keep a smile on her face despite the difficulties in life. Lan replied, "I am grateful for this life, grateful for what I have, grateful for my children, grateful for my job, and grateful for the friends who have always been there for me. They are my biggest source of encouragement, helping me overcome all difficulties." Lan's words warmed my heart. Gratitude is not only the act of thanking for what we have, but the recognition of the presence of others in our lives. When you are grateful for the people around you, when you appreciate every small help they bring, you will feel your heart warmer and more peaceful. Once, I took a walk in a flower garden and saw the clouds drifting lazily across the sky. The gentle sunlight shone down, creating an unexpectedly peaceful atmosphere. I suddenly realized that it had been a long time since I had stopped to appreciate simple things like this. I thought of the Buddha's teaching. Mindfulness is full awareness of every moment in life, being present in every breath, every step. Gratitude is an essential part of mindfulness. When you live fully in each moment, you will feel joy in the small things. When you breathe, you are grateful for being alive. When you eat, you are grateful for having food to nourish your body. When you walk, you are grateful for having healthy legs to move. Gratitude is not something complicated or distant. It is simply the ability to recognize the value of the things around us, even the smallest ones. When you are grateful, you will see life become lighter. You no longer focus on shortcomings or lack, but instead on the things you already have. You will realize that life is not lacking in wonderful things. It's just that you haven't stopped to notice them. The Buddha taught that gratitude is the path to peace. When you are grateful, you will no longer feel stressed or anxious, but will find peace in every moment. Therefore, start with the small things in life, from your breath, from your meals, from those around you. Be grateful for those things, and you will feel peace in your heart. Life is not always easy. All of us will face challenges, difficulties, and moments when we feel exhausted. During such times, we often seek solutions to escape suffering, to find a way to fight through. However, according to the Buddha, difficulties are not something we should avoid, but opportunities for growth. It is in these challenges that we learn to let go, not to resist, and to find peace in our own hearts. The Buddha taught, suffering is an inseparable part of life. But if you can sit quietly in the midst of suffering, you will realize that this very pain can lead you to a deeper understanding of yourself. This may seem difficult to understand, but if we look at everyday life, we will see that each difficulty, each challenge is a valuable lesson that helps us grow and mature. A small story in my life that I will always remember is about a friend of mine. His name is Min. Min is a person who always strives to improve, always wanting his life to be better. But he constantly faced difficulties in his work and relationships. One time, Min told me that he had tried his best, but everything seemed to never go in the right direction. He always felt like he was stuck in a spiral with no way out. I asked Min, "Have you ever tried stopping and looking at what's happening?" Min looked at me in surprise. Then he said, "I can't stop. I always feel like I need to do something to change, to escape these difficulties." I shared with him that sometimes in the toughest moments, we don't need to do anything but just sit still, accept the pain, and observe it. That is when we learn how to let go. Min listened to me and tried to follow. After a while, he shared that when he stopped fighting the difficulties and instead sat and observed, he started to feel his soul becoming lighter. He no longer felt swept away by anger or disappointment. He realized that instead of fighting life, he just needed to learn how to accept and find peace within his own soul. The Buddha once taught, suffering is unavoidable in life, but what matters is how we face suffering. If we always try to escape suffering, we will never grow. Suffering is not the enemy, but a teacher that helps us understand ourselves better. Only when we accept and do not resist suffering can we recognize the valuable lessons it brings. Min's story is a clear example that when we stop fighting life, we find peace. The Buddha taught that sitting still in suffering does not mean being passive or weak, but it is the strength to face reality and learn how to change ourselves from deep within. It is in those moments that we realize peace is not a distant place, but a state within the heart. Once, I read a small story that I felt was very fitting with the Buddha's teaching on letting go. The story is about a man walking through a forest. On his way, he meets an old man sitting by a stream. The old man asks him, "Do you feel tired?" The man replies, "Yes, I have been walking for a long distance and I feel very tired." The old man then gives the man a basket full of stones and says, "Carry this basket and continue on your way." The man takes the basket and continues his journey. After a while, the man notices the basket getting heavier and feels it difficult to keep going. He turns back and asks the old man, "Why do I have to carry this basket? It's too heavy and makes me tired." The old man simply smiles and says, "You can put the basket down anytime. Just realize that the basket is not yours, and it is not necessary to carry it anymore." This story reminds me that in life, sometimes we create burdens for ourselves, thoughts, worries, and past hurts that we continue to carry. But we have the right to let go of these burdens, just like the man in the story when he realized the basket wasn't his to carry. The Buddha teaches that when we accept that difficulties are part of life, we no longer fear or try to avoid them. Instead, we will find peace within our hearts. Every challenge, every suffering is an opportunity for us to learn and grow. And only when we dare to face and learn how to accept, instead of resisting, can we walk through challenges more steadily. A friend of mine, named Lan, once went through a very difficult period in her life. She lost the job she loved and felt like her life was falling apart. She cried a lot, feeling like she couldn't go on. However, instead of despairing, she began to look for lessons in her struggles. She realized that losing her job wasn't the end, but an opportunity for her to change and find a new path. Lan began to learn to accept that sometimes things don't go according to plan, and the important thing was that she could rise up and keep going. Difficulties are not something we have to fight. They are something we need to learn how to face and let go of. When we stop resisting suffering and accept it as part of life, we will find peace. Peace doesn't come from avoiding difficulties, but from facing them calmly and understanding that we can learn from every challenge. Only when we understand that every difficulty is an opportunity for growth do we truly begin the path to freedom. The Buddha taught that it is in the most difficult moments that we can find deep understanding of ourselves and life. To find peace, we simply need to learn how to let go, stop resisting, and live fully in each present moment. In life, each of us has wounds, pain, and imperfections. We often tend to avoid the less beautiful parts, the flaws within ourselves, and always crave to become a perfect version, free of mistakes. However, according to the Buddha's teachings, accepting ourselves is the path to true peace. When we accept ourselves with our wounds, our imperfections, we will find freedom and peace within our souls. The Buddha once taught, knowing oneself is the path to wisdom. Not knowing oneself is the path to suffering. Accepting oneself does not mean we accept deficiencies without change, but it is an awareness that we do not need to become someone else to deserve love and respect. Only when we live truly with ourselves can we find peace in life. I heard a story from a friend of mine named Thun. Than is a beautiful, intelligent woman, but she always felt she wasn't good enough. Despite having a stable career, she felt incomplete, always comparing herself to those around her and unable to accept her flaws. She always felt pressure from societal standards, and in her eyes, there was always something imperfect about herself. One day, Than decided to visit a small temple in the village. She sat next to an old woman who had lived in the temple her whole life. She shared with the old woman her worries about herself, the flaws she couldn't overcome. The old woman listened, then smiled and said, "Than, have you ever looked at the old mirror in the temple? That mirror, though old, still reflects who you are every time you look into it. That is acceptance. Even though the mirror is not perfect, it still does its job well." Those words made Tan stop and think for a long time. She realized that even in her flaws, in the wounds she carried, she was still herself. The imperfections didn't make her lesser, but were part of the journey that helped her understand herself better. Accepting oneself is the courage to face oneself, the forgiveness of mistakes, and the understanding that every wound, every flaw is part of the complete person she is becoming. There is another story I want to share with you about a man named Kwang. Kwang is successful in his work, but he always feels lonely and emotionally lacking. He always tried to please others, seeking acceptance, but couldn't find peace within himself. One day, Kwang met a teacher during a meditation session. The teacher asked Kwang, "Have you ever felt that you're living to please others, not for yourself?" Kwang thought for a moment and replied, "I always try to please everyone, but I still can't find peace." The teacher smiled and said, "Accepting yourself is not compromising with life, but understanding that you don't have to change to be loved. You just need to live authentically, and then you will naturally find peace." Kwang realized that for many years, he had been racing to meet others' expectations, always trying to fulfill the standards set by society. He hadn't dared to live authentically with his feelings, nor had he dared to acknowledge the wounds of the past. Only when he started to accept his mistakes, his pain, and his flaws did he feel lighter. Accepting oneself doesn't mean compromising or overlooking mistakes, but it's an awareness that we don't need to change ourselves to become deserving. The stories of Kwang and Than show that when we accept ourselves with our wounds and imperfections, we no longer feel pressure or stress. Accepting oneself is the path to freedom, the liberation from the expectations we place on ourselves and others. When we live authentically, we no longer have to live in a shell that society wants, but as a free, peaceful, and vibrant human being. The Buddha taught, the path to peace is not the path of avoiding suffering, but the path of facing suffering, understanding it, and from that, finding freedom. When we accept our flaws and wounds, we no longer feel fear or inferiority. We understand that every person has imperfect parts, but it is those imperfections that make us unique and meaningful. There is a profound story I want to share. A friend of mine named Min went through many ups and downs in life. He had a successful career, but always felt uneasy and unhappy. He always felt the lack of love and care from others. One day, Min attended a course on mindfulness and self-love. In that course, Min learned how to let go of the expectations he had set for himself and others. He understood that it was not necessary to please everyone to feel valuable. He began to accept his mistakes, his wounds, and his flaws. Min realized that only when he lived authentically with himself could he find peace in his heart. Accepting oneself does not mean we overlook mistakes or shortcomings, but that we understand they are an inseparable part of life. Every wound, every difficulty brings valuable lessons. When we learn to love ourselves, we will no longer feel insecure or fearful. We will live with freedom and peace in our hearts. Self-acceptance is a long journey, but it is the journey that leads to true peace. When we live authentically with ourselves, we will feel freedom and happiness, not from the outside, but from within our own souls. Every wound, every difficulty is an opportunity for us to grow, to understand that we don't need to be perfect to be loved. The Buddha taught, love yourself before loving others. Accept yourself before expecting others to accept you. When we love and accept ourselves, we will find peace in every moment of life. And from there, life will become lighter and more meaningful than ever before. In today's fast-paced life, we often overlook simple but incredibly important things, like our breath. Most of us only notice our breath when something goes wrong, such as when we are sick or feeling stressed. However, according to the Buddha's teachings, every breath is a precious gift the universe has given us. When we pay attention to each breath, we will realize that life is nurturing us every moment, helping us remain calm and not be swept away by outside worries. The Buddha taught, breath is the source of life, the connection between us and the universe. A miracle in life is that no matter how busy we are with work, worries, or relationships, our breath is always present, bringing us back to the present moment. In each breath, we find real life, and in it, deep peace. I remember once, I participated in a meditation retreat with Master Min, a well-known meditation teacher in the area. He taught us a very simple but profoundly deep lesson. Feel life through each breath. One morning, when we were meditating together, the teacher asked us to focus on our breath. No sounds, no interruptions, just the breath coming and going. At first, I found it quite difficult. It felt like I was caught up in thoughts and worries about work, family, and other things in life. But when I was patient and focused solely on my breath, I began to feel the deep peace in each breath. The more I focused on my breath, the more I realized that it is something that will never leave me. Each time I inhale, I feel life flowing into my body, and each time I exhale, I feel like I'm releasing all worries, fears, and tension. At that moment, I realized that the breath is the bridge between us and life. It requires no effort from us. It simply comes and goes naturally, like a gift from the universe. Each breath is a priceless gift, an opportunity to live fully in every moment. To better understand the value of breath, I want to tell you a story about a friend of mine named Tom. Tom is someone who seems very successful, always has a good job, and helps others. However, Tom always felt tired, stressed, and could never find peace in her heart. She was always caught up in the worries of work, relationships, and life problems. One day, Tom shared with me that she felt like she was losing control of her life, that everything was passing by and she couldn't keep up. Seeing this, I advised Tom to try focusing on her breath as a way to reduce stress. At first, she didn't understand why she should do that. But because we were friends, she decided to give it a try. We meditated together one morning. I told her, just focus on your breath. Don't think of anything else. Don't do anything else. Just feel the breath coming in and going out. At first, Tom was quite confused and couldn't do it. She was still caught up in her thoughts and worries. But then, after several attempts, she began to feel something very special. The breath wasn't just life. It was also a way for her to return to herself. Gradually, Tom realized that when she focused on her breath, she could let go of all worries and stress. She felt lighter and began to find peace in her soul. This made her change her perspective on life, no longer feeling the pressure to achieve everything while forgetting about herself. Feeling life through each breath helped Tom realize that life is not about the things we have to do, but about how we live in each present moment. The Buddha taught mindfulness is full awareness and attention to the present, not being drawn into the past or worrying about the future. When we focus on our breath, we are practicing mindfulness. Mindfulness is not a difficult skill, but a way of life, a way to be present in every moment. When we live with mindfulness, we will realize that every breath has its own importance, every moment has its own value and beauty. Tom's story is a perfect example of mindfulness through the breath. She had once been swept away by the worries of life and forgot that true peace comes from awareness of the present, not from external things. When we focus on the breath, we gradually understand that worries and fears are just temporary clouds. And as long as we return to the present, everything becomes lighter. There is a saying in Buddhism that I deeply resonate with. Every breath is a gift from the universe. The breath is the one thing we cannot live without. Just think, if we no longer had breath, life would lose its meaning. That's why when we become aware of the value of every breath, we will feel that we are part of the universe, part of the vast life that we cannot control, but can still experience. Feeling life through each breath helps us realize that everything in life is impermanent. Each passing moment is an opportunity to live fully. Instead of worrying about the past or the future, let's focus on the present, on our breath, as it is the only thing we can control. So, if you feel tired, stressed, or anxious, stop and focus on your breath. Feel each breath in and out, and you will see that in each of those moments, life is nurturing you, bringing you back to yourself. When we focus on the breath, we not only live fully, but also find peace in our hearts. Breath is the precious gift from the universe, the connection between us and life. And when we learn to appreciate this gift, we will realize that peace is not somewhere far away, but in each breath, in every present moment we live. Happiness is not a destination, but a journey. Happiness is not something we search for outside, but the ability to live fully and with gratitude in every present moment. When we let go of endless desires, we will find joy in the simple things. Life is not always easy, and on this journey, sometimes we have to face significant challenges. These difficulties may be personal struggles, broken relationships, or even pain that we cannot avoid. However, the Buddha always taught that in times of hardship, we are not facing it alone. The Buddha advised us that when we see those around us struggling, we can help them not only with material things, but also with words of encouragement, sharing, and compassion. The Buddha taught that compassion is not only sympathy or pity for others' suffering, but it is the active effort to help others overcome their difficulties. Compassion has no limits. It doesn't only help when there are conditions, but sometimes a word, a gesture, or simply being present is enough to help someone feel lighter in their time of struggle. I remember a story about a friend of mine named Hai. Hai is a very positive person and always tries to live happily and optimistically. However, one day she faced a huge challenge in her life. She lost her job and felt like the whole world was collapsing. The following days, Hai became quiet, withdrawn, and lost the optimism she once had. One afternoon, I met Hai at our regular cafe. Seeing her sitting alone, I walked over and sat down. We started talking, and from that moment, I realized that although Hai didn't say anything, she really needed someone to share with and encourage her. I didn't know how to solve her work problem, but I knew I could listen and empathize with her sadness. I simply sat there, listening to Hai talk about her struggles without needing to give advice or solutions. Sometimes, just having a friend to share with is enough to ease a part of the burden. Since that day, Hai began to change. She felt lighter and gradually started to find optimism in life again. Sharing and empathizing during tough times is how we help each other overcome challenges, as the Buddha taught. The Buddha didn't just teach us to help others with material things, but more importantly, with compassion and attention to those around us, especially in difficult times. When we notice someone struggling, whether in their work, relationships, or daily life, we can help them by offering encouragement and sharing love. I remember an old teacher, Miss Mai, whom I greatly respect. She was wholeheartedly dedicated to her work and always treated her students like her own children. But once, I heard her share that she was facing many difficulties at work. The stress and pressure were almost overwhelming. Despite this, she continued to teach and care for her students with great dedication. One evening, I visited her. She shared her struggles and said that sometimes she felt everything was too much to bear. I sat and listened and encouraged her that it's okay to rest and take care of herself, and that each challenge is an opportunity for us to learn and grow. Miss Mai's story reminded me of a very important lesson. Compassion is not just about helping with material things, but about empathy, listening, and sharing love in difficult times. Words of encouragement, even simple ones, can be a spiritual balm that helps someone regain confidence in themselves and life. Going through challenges together is not only about helping materially, but understanding and empathizing with the sufferings of others, thus creating a stronger community. The Buddha taught that when we open our hearts to others, when we share their burdens and struggles, that very compassion helps us ease the pain, not only for the other person, but also for ourselves. Once, I met an old friend, Thu, after a long time. She shared that she had just gone through a major shock in her life, a painful breakup with her longtime partner. At that moment, all I could do was listen and empathize with Thu. She said that when she was in despair, she felt very lonely, and the encouragement from those around her helped her gradually overcome the pain. It is compassion and sharing during difficult moments that is the key to opening the door to peace. When we understand that everyone has their own challenges, when we are ready to walk alongside each other in hardships, we will see that challenges are no longer something to fear, but an opportunity to learn and grow. Compassion is the strength that helps us overcome all challenges. When we help others, when we share in their pain, we not only alleviate their suffering, but also lighten the burden in our own hearts. It is through sharing and love that we find peace for ourselves and for those around us. So in this life, when faced with difficulties, don't forget that we are not walking through it alone. And don't forget to share compassion with those around us, so that together we can overcome challenges and find peace in our hearts. In modern life, full of busyness, noise, and worries, we can easily get caught up in the whirlwind of work, relationships, and endless responsibilities. Every day, we chase time, worry about the future, yearn for the past, and sometimes forget that the peace we seek is not something external, but rather within our own souls. The Buddha taught that each of us has a quiet space within, no matter how noisy and chaotic life outside may be. This peace is always present. We just need to know how to calm down and return to ourselves. If we listen and connect with our inner selves, we will feel deep peace in each breath, in every present moment. Once, I visited a small temple on top of a mountain. The atmosphere there was completely different from the noise of the city. The space in the temple was so quiet, with only the sound of the gentle wind blowing through the trees and the sound of footsteps on the stones. I sat down on a stone bench, looking out at the distant fields, and suddenly realized that, while everything around me was still moving, my mind felt very calm. It was a very special moment, because I realized that peace is not something we find out there, but a state of the mind. When we can calm down and not be swept away by the hustle and bustle of life, we can find a peaceful space within ourselves. Each of us has a peaceful space within our hearts, like a small room inside a large house. This room may be hidden by worries, fleeting thoughts, but as long as we stop and search, we will realize that this space is always there, ready to welcome us when we need it. I remember a story about an old friend of mine named Min. Min is a very active person and is always busy with work. He always felt pressure and fatigue because he didn't have enough time for himself. One day, after a long and stressful meeting, Min decided to walk to the park to relax. While walking, Min sat down on a bench, closed his eyes, and began to breathe deeply. Suddenly, he felt an unusual calm in his heart, as if everything around him had stopped. Min said that even though there was noise and people walking by, he felt a stillness in his soul, as if all worries and fatigue had disappeared. Min didn't seek peace elsewhere. He just needed to sit down, listen to his breath, and allow himself to stop in that moment. Min's story reminds me that peace is not something we can buy or find in a special place, but rather a state within, always available within each of us. When we know how to stop and return to ourselves, we can feel deep peace, no matter how chaotic life outside may be. In our busy lives, we are often swept away by worries, work, and responsibilities, forgetting that when we stop and listen, we will hear the voice of our own soul, the call for peace that we are searching for. The Buddha taught that only when we know how to calm down and stop chasing negative thoughts and emotions can we find peace in our souls. There's a story about a young woman named Hung. She is an office worker who deals with an enormous workload every day, and she always feels stressed and tired. One day, after a long day at work, Hung went to see a teacher at the temple to seek advice. She said that she always felt anxious and stressed, not knowing how to find peace in life. The teacher smiled and told her, "Hung, peace is not a destination, but a journey. Take a few minutes every day to stop, breathe deeply, and feel the present moment. When we do that, we will feel the stillness in our hearts and peace will come naturally." After hearing the teacher's words, Hung started practicing meditation and set aside time for herself every day. She spent a few minutes every morning and evening sitting still, listening to her breath and feeling what was happening in her body. Within a short time, she noticed that even though life outside was still filled with challenges and stress, peace had begun to appear in her soul. Hung's story is a clear example that peace does not come from the outside, but from the ability to calm down and return to oneself. When we know how to stop and appreciate the simple moments in life, we will see that peace is always present in our hearts. Peace in life doesn't need to be sought in distant places, nor in big things. The simplest things in life are the source of peace. A good meal, a joyful conversation with loved ones, or simply a quiet morning when we wake up and feel the first breath of the new day. All of these can bring peace to the soul. I have a friend named Lan, a single mother. Despite a very busy job, she always tries to find time for her children and herself. One day, Lan shared with me that she had found peace in the simple moments spent with her children. She said, "Every evening after a long day, my child and I sit together and talk about what happened during the day. I don't need anything more, just a quiet space and being present with my child. Those moments are priceless peace." Lan's story helped me realize that peace can come from the simple things we sometimes overlook. When we learn to appreciate the small moments in life, we will feel the stillness in our hearts, and from there, we will be able to live more peacefully, even in the hustle and challenges of life. Peace is not something distant. It is an internal state, always present within us when we know how to calm down and return to ourselves. The Buddha taught that each of us has a quiet space in our hearts, and as long as we know how to stop, breathe, and listen, we will feel peace in every present moment. Remember, peace is not a destination, but the journey we go through every day. When we can let go of worries, fleeting thoughts, and return to ourselves, we will feel deep peace in our hearts. This peace doesn't need to be sought elsewhere. it is in the simplest things in life. So when you feel tired or anxious, try stopping for a moment, sitting down, and listening to your breath. You will realize that within each of us, there is a quiet space to return to feel life, and to find peace that nothing can disturb. In today's busy and challenging life, we often think of freedom as a material state. Freedom of space, freedom of time, and freedom to do what we want. However, true freedom does not come from escaping external limits, but from the ability to not be bound by negative emotions, desires, and unrealistic aspirations. Spiritual freedom is when we free ourselves from worries, sorrow, and useless things in the heart. The Buddha taught that spiritual freedom is not something we seek outside, but an internal state, coming from living with compassion and gratitude. When we live with compassion, loving all those around us without discrimination, and when we are grateful for what we have without always yearning for unrealistic things, we will feel freedom within our hearts. This is the path the Buddha taught to achieve true peace and freedom. Imagine a boat floating on the sea. When the boat sets sail, if there is no favorable wind or current, it cannot go far. However, when the boat is freed from all ropes and obstacles, it will drift freely, no longer bound. Our souls are like that boat. When we are no longer bound by anger, hatred, or greed, we will be free, like a boat in the vast ocean, floating freely in peaceful space. There is a small story about a man named Duk. Duk is a very talented person, always working hard and achieving certain successes in life. However, Duk always felt dissatisfied with himself. He always wanted more money, more power, more recognition, and he never felt enough. Every day, Duk felt like he was racing, and no matter what he achieved, he still didn't feel peace or happiness. One day, Duk decided to find a teacher for advice. The teacher looked at him with compassion and said, "Do you know why you always feel lacking? It's because you have never stopped to appreciate what you have. You do not appreciate the simple things in life, and your mind is always chasing after unrealistic desires." After hearing the teacher's words, Duk felt awakened. He began practicing gratitude and compassion every day, not just for big things, but for ordinary moments, like a meal, a conversation, or simply waking up every morning. Gradually, he realized that when he let go of endless desires and stopped comparing himself to others, his soul began to feel freedom and peace. Duk's story shows that freedom doesn't come from having more, but from the ability to live in the present, appreciate what we have, and let go of unrealistic ambitions. When we accept ourselves and what we have, we will feel free, no longer bound by unrealistic wishes and meaningless worries. One important factor that helps us achieve spiritual freedom is compassion. Compassion is not pity, but unconditional love, empathy, and sharing in others' suffering without judgment or discrimination. When we practice compassion, we not only free ourselves from anger and hatred, but also help others find peace in their hearts. There is another story about a woman named Lan. Lan is a very kind person, always ready to help others. However, she often feels tired and helpless because she can't help everyone who needs it. One day, Lan met an old friend who was struggling in her work and life. This friend kept complaining, blaming others, and feeling she never received the recognition she deserved. Lan sat silently, listening to her friend, and then gently spoke. "My dear, if you always feel angry and resentful, how can you find peace in your heart? Try looking at the good things in life and be grateful for them, rather than always chasing after things that can't be changed." Lan's words made her friend realize that she had let anger and resentment occupy her mind, preventing her from feeling peace in life. From then on, she started to change her thinking, focusing on the positive things and learning to practice compassion with herself and others. After some time, she felt her soul lighter and freer than ever. This story illustrates that compassion not only helps us love others, but also serves as a way to free ourselves from negative emotions. When we face others' difficulties and suffering with compassion, we no longer feel burdened or bound by our own worries, but instead, we feel freedom and serenity in our souls. Another important factor in achieving spiritual freedom is gratitude. Gratitude is the ability to recognize and appreciate the good things in life, even the smallest ones. When we are grateful for what we have, our hearts will no longer be consumed by worries about what we lack. There's another story about a man named Sun. Sun is a person who often complains about life. He always feels he lacks everything: money, recognition, time. One day, he happened to meet an old friend and told him about his struggles. His friend listened and then smiled and said, "Son, have you ever stopped to appreciate the good things you already have?" We all have precious things in our hands, but if we don't appreciate them, we will never feel enough. Sun didn't quite understand, but he decided to try one thing. He started taking time each day to write down 3 things he was grateful for. Gradually, he realized that every day held countless things to be grateful for, from small things like a warm meal, a cheerful conversation, to bigger things like having good health and loved ones around. When Sun learned to appreciate these things, he felt his soul lighten and no longer got caught up in useless worries. Sun's story shows that gratitude helps us view life differently. When we are grateful for what we have, we will feel wealth and freedom in our souls, no longer bound by unrealistic ambitions or negative emotions. Spiritual freedom is the ability to free ourselves from negative emotions and unrealistic desires. And this is the true freedom the Buddha teaches. When we live with compassion and gratitude, we will no longer be bound by things that cannot be changed, and our soul will become free and peaceful. To achieve this freedom, we need to learn how to let go of endless desires, live in the present, and appreciate what we have. When we do this, we will feel freedom in our souls, and life will become lighter and more meaningful. Gratitude and suffering. In life, no one can avoid times of difficulty, challenge, or suffering. Sometimes, when facing pain, we feel like everything is collapsing, and there's nothing left to hope for. But the Buddha teaches that suffering is not a negative thing, but an opportunity for us to grow. We can view pain as a valuable lesson, an opportunity to develop ourselves, to refresh and expand our hearts. When we are grateful for even the pain, we no longer fear it, but can see it as a challenge to overcome. There is a very touching story about a mother named Mai. Mai is a strong woman, but her life has not been easy. She has faced many hardships and losses. Mai has a son named Nam, who was very healthy as a child, but when he turned 3, he contracted a rare disease. This illness kept Nam in the hospital for many months, forcing Mai to leave her job and dedicate all her time and energy to taking care of her son. Every day, Mai had to witness her son's pain and endure the intense worry about Nam's future. She felt like all her hopes were gradually fading because, despite her best efforts, Nam's condition didn't improve. One day, as she sat by Nam's hospital bed, Mai suddenly remembered the Buddha's teachings she had learned before. Suffering is a part of life, but if we face it with compassion and patience, we will find peace. At that moment, she realized that the pain she was experiencing was not something to resent or fear, but an opportunity for her to grow and learn more about patience, courage, and unconditional love. She began to change her perspective on her son's illness. She no longer saw it as a challenge to defeat, but as a part of life that needed to be accepted and faced. Mai not only learned to care for Nam better, but she also learned to thank life for giving her the opportunity to become a more resilient and loving mother. She thanked the brief moments when Nam could smile, thanked the times when, despite the hardships, she was able to be with her son. She no longer saw pain as just a loss, but as an opportunity for her to grow and become stronger. Mai began practicing gratitude every day, even in the toughest times. She felt the pain seem to ease when she viewed it through a new lens, a lens of acceptance and love. Mai realized that being grateful in suffering was the key to overcoming difficulties without being defeated. The Buddha teaches that suffering is an inseparable part of life. It is not a bad thing, but an opportunity for us to grow and learn. Every time we face suffering, it is a moment to reflect on ourselves, to learn to let go of what no longer matters, and to change our thoughts and feelings. Imagine a young tree. If it doesn't endure strong winds and heavy rain, it cannot grow into a large, strong tree. Suffering is the same. It helps us strengthen ourselves. It helps us develop our mind and inner strength, just like a young tree growing amidst storms. There is a story about a young monk named Tom. He was very passionate about the monastic path. But during the first many years of his practice, he always felt disappointed because everything seemed too difficult. Every time he faced a challenge, he felt he didn't have the strength to overcome it. One time, he met an older, wise monk and asked, "Master, how can I succeed in my practice? How can I not feel tired and discouraged during difficult times?" The old monk smiled and pointed to a large tree nearby, saying, "Look at this tree. It has stood firm for many years through storms, strong winds, and scorching sun. Yet it never complains or grumbles. This tree simply stands there, endures, and grows. You too, you will only find peace when you learn to stand firm, endure, and see each challenge as an opportunity for you to grow." After that conversation, Tom suddenly realized that suffering is not something to fear, but a part of the path that helps him improve himself. He began to change the way he viewed difficulties. And every time he faced a challenge, he no longer felt disappointed, but saw it as an opportunity to learn and grow. Gratitude in suffering does not mean we must accept pain without reacting. This does not mean we should not be sad or in pain when facing challenges. Gratitude in suffering means we know how to accept pain as a part of life, and from that, learn to view it with compassion and love. Accepting pain is not about letting ourselves suffer, but understanding that suffering is an unavoidable part of life, and instead of resisting it, we should learn to face it and overcome it. When we can accept pain, we will no longer feel trapped by negative emotions, but instead, we will have the opportunity to become freer and grow stronger. There is a famous saying by the Buddha: "When we endure, we not only overcome suffering, but also find an invisible source of strength within ourselves." Suffering is an opportunity for us to understand that strength does not come from avoiding challenges, but from facing them calmly and with resilience. We cannot avoid challenges and pain in life, but what matters is how we face them and learn from them. Gratitude in suffering does not mean we deny the pain, but that we learn to view it as an opportunity for growth. When we are grateful for our pain, we will no longer feel fear or helplessness, but will see the maturity and wisdom it brings. Each time we face suffering, remember that it is a valuable lesson. Let pain teach us lessons about patience, resilience, and love. And when we can be grateful even in the most difficult times, that is when we find true peace in our hearts. In life, all of us cannot avoid being hurt at times. It may be a harsh word from a close friend, betrayal from someone we trust, or simply a thoughtless action from someone that deeply hurts us. Each time, feelings of hatred, anger, or sorrow often invade our minds, making it difficult for us to feel at ease, to find peace. However, the Buddha taught that forgiveness is not just an act for others, but it is a liberation for ourselves. When we forgive, we not only help others feel lighter, but we also help ourselves let go of negative emotions and free ourselves from the suffering that hatred brings. Forgiveness is the key to finding peace in our hearts, the way for us to live freely, unbound by the past. There is a story about a mother named Mai. She has a son named An, and they live in a small house on the outskirts. One day, when An grew up, he decided to leave and pursue a career in the big city. Before leaving, An promised his mother he would visit often, but as time went on, he contacted her less and became more distant. Mai was heartbroken to see her son change. Her calls went unanswered, and her messages were ignored. She felt abandoned, and the pain in her heart grew. She even started having negative thoughts about her son, feeling disappointed and angry. Mai lived for a long time with feelings of loneliness and hurt. One day, on an autumn morning, Mai went out to the garden, sat on a stone bench, and watched the yellow leaves fall. In that moment, she remembered the Buddha's teachings on forgiveness. The Buddha said that when we forgive, it's not just to make others feel comfortable, but to free ourselves from the burden of hatred. She realized that if she continued to be angry and resentful toward her son, she would never find peace. She understood that forgiveness was not about forgetting the pain or accepting betrayal, but about letting go of negative emotions so they wouldn't control her life. Indeed, when we forgive, we not only free others, but we free ourselves. Forgiveness helps us no longer be bound by negative emotions, no longer let past suffering dominate our souls. Imagine, on an afternoon when you're walking in the park, you're holding a bag full of stones. These stones represent the hatred, anger, and pain you've endured from others. At first, the bag is not too heavy, but as you keep holding it without putting it down, each step becomes more difficult. You begin to feel tired, in pain, and unable to enjoy the beautiful things around you. However, if you decide to put the bag down, you will immediately feel relief. You can walk freely, lightly, and enjoy the space around you. That is forgiveness. When we forgive, we put down the heavy bag of stones, allowing our souls to become free, light, and peaceful. A common misconception many people have about forgiveness is that we forgive because we are weak, or that forgiving means accepting the wrongs of others. But the truth is, forgiveness is an act of strength, the resilience to not let pain control us. Forgiveness doesn't mean agreeing with what others have done, but it means not allowing their actions to hurt us anymore. There is a story about a famous leader who had faced a lot of injustice and betrayal in his career. One time, when his closest companion betrayed and hurt him, he decided not to seek revenge. Instead, he forgave this person and continued on his path. He understood that an act of revenge would only make the heart heavier, while forgiveness helps the soul become lighter and freer. Just as the Buddha taught, when you forgive, you not only free others, but you free yourself. Forgiveness is a noble act of a strong person because they do not let external factors decide their emotions. We cannot avoid challenges and pain in life, but what matters is how we face them and learn from them. Gratitude in suffering does not mean we deny the pain, but that we learn to view it as an opportunity for growth. When we are grateful for our pain, we will no longer feel fear or helplessness, but will see the maturity and wisdom it brings. Each time we face suffering, remember that it is a valuable lesson. Let pain teach us lessons about patience, resilience, and love. And when we can be grateful even in the most difficult times, that is when we find true peace in our hearts. In life, all of us cannot avoid being hurt at times. It may be a harsh word from a close friend, betrayal from someone we trust, or simply a thoughtless action from someone that deeply hurts us. Each time, feelings of hatred, anger, or sorrow often invade our minds, making it difficult for us to feel at ease, to find peace. However, the Buddha taught that forgiveness is not just an act for others, but it is a liberation for ourselves. When we forgive, we not only help others feel lighter, but we also help ourselves let go of negative emotions and free ourselves from the suffering that hatred brings. Forgiveness is the key to finding peace in our hearts, the way for us to live freely, unbound by the past. There is a story about a mother named Mai. She has a son named An, and they live in a small house on the outskirts. One day, when An grew up, he decided to leave and pursue a career in the big city. Before leaving, An promised his mother he would visit often, but as time went on, he contacted her less and became more distant. Mai was heartbroken to see her son change. Her calls went unanswered, and her messages were ignored. She felt abandoned, and the pain in her heart grew. She even started having negative thoughts about her son, feeling disappointed and angry. Mai lived for a long time with feelings of loneliness and hurt. One day, on an autumn morning, Mai went out to the garden, sat on a stone bench, and watched the yellow leaves fall. In that moment, she remembered the Buddha's teachings on forgiveness. The Buddha said that when we forgive, it's not just to make others feel comfortable, but to free ourselves from the burden of hatred. She realized that if she continued to be angry and resentful toward her son, she would never find peace. She understood that forgiveness was not about forgetting the pain or accepting betrayal, but about letting go of negative emotions so they wouldn't control her life. Indeed, when we forgive, we not only free others, but we free ourselves. Forgiveness helps us no longer be bound by negative emotions, no longer let past suffering dominate our souls. Imagine, on an afternoon when you're walking in the park, you're holding a bag full of stones. These stones represent the hatred, anger, and pain you've endured from others. At first, the bag is not too heavy, but as you keep holding it without putting it down, each step becomes more difficult. You begin to feel tired, in pain, and unable to enjoy the beautiful things around you. However, if you decide to put the bag down, you will immediately feel relief. You can walk freely, lightly, and enjoy the space around you. That is forgiveness. When we forgive, we put down the heavy bag of stones, allowing our souls to become free, light, and peaceful. A common misconception many people have about forgiveness is that we forgive because we are weak, or that forgiving means accepting the wrongs of others. But the truth is, forgiveness is an act of strength, the resilience to not let pain control us. Forgiveness doesn't mean agreeing with what others have done, but it means not allowing their actions to hurt us anymore. There is a story about a famous leader who had faced a lot of injustice and betrayal in his career. One time, when his closest companion betrayed and hurt him, he decided not to seek revenge. Instead, he forgave this person and continued on his path. He understood that an act of revenge would only make the heart heavier, while forgiveness helps the soul become lighter and freer. Just as the Buddha taught, when you forgive, you not only free others, but you free yourself. Forgiveness is a noble act of a strong person because they do not let external factors decide their emotions. When Mai realized that to find peace in her soul, she had to forgive her son, she felt as if a heavy stone in her heart had been lifted. She no longer felt stressed or anxious about her son not caring about her. She began to feel love for herself again and found peace in her heart. Mai decided to call her son and said, "My son, I want you to know that even if you don't return, even if you make mistakes, I will always love you and forgive you. I just want you to be happy." These words were not only forgiveness for her son, but also a liberation for Mai herself, helping her no longer be controlled by anger and hurt. In life, we will always encounter situations where others hurt us. These are unavoidable. But the Buddha teaches that forgiveness is not only for others, but for ourselves. When we forgive, we not only let go of negative emotions, but we also free ourselves from burdens in our hearts, helping us find peace and freedom. Remember, forgiveness is not about accepting wrongdoing, but about freeing our hearts and not being bound by the pains of the past. Forgiveness is a gift you give to yourself, a liberation from the suffering that you no longer need to carry. So if today you are facing pain, betrayal, or any hurt, try to sit down for a moment, take a deep breath, and think about forgiveness. Forgive yourself, forgive others, so your soul can be freed, free, and at peace. In this life, sometimes we carry wounds and pain that time cannot soothe. But don't forget that healing is not a destination, but a journey. Each step, no matter how small, helps us gently let go of burdens. The pain is not something we need to avoid, but a lesson to help us grow, to help us understand ourselves better, our resilience and compassion. The Buddha taught that forgiveness is not weakness, but an act of strength. Forgiving others is not because they deserve it, but because we deserve peace in our hearts. Forgiveness is when we choose to let go of the wounds in our hearts, so they no longer control our lives, so the pain does not take over our hearts. Remember that each time you feel tired, when the pain feels too great, don't forget to stop and breathe. Don't rush. Don't worry about the future or regret the past. Right now, you can find peace in your own breath. Gently acknowledge your emotions, accept that you are not perfect, and know that in that imperfection, you are still beautiful, still deserving of love. This life, even with its difficulties, even when we feel lost, always has a quiet peace within each of us, as long as we stop, listen, and return to ourselves. Don't let any pain make you forget your own worth. You deserve peace, love, and healing. So in moments when your soul feels lost, remember that you are never alone. No matter how the world changes, no matter the challenges, compassion, forgiveness, and gratitude will always be the light that leads you back. And when you walk through stormy days, you will see that it is these gentle, loving steps that help you find true peace in life. Take time to care for your soul, to heal from within, because only when you love yourself can you spread love to the world around you.